Welcome everyone back to the Arrowhead Pulse Podcast, where we're talking everything Kansas City Chiefs football. I am one of your co-hosts, Austin Thompson, aka OZ, and I am joined by none other than Nicholas Mignon. Nick, talk to the people. Tell them how you're feeling today.
Well, if you're watching and not listening, you can see that I'm blinded by the lights because there's a window and I'm just absorbing all that light right now. Um, um, but otherwise, feeling good, feeling like, you know, got lots to talk about with the draft and, crazy news and stuff. So I say let's dive right in.
All right. Well, yeah. Like Nick said today, we're going to talk about the results of the NFL draft and kind of emphasis heavily on the Chiefs side of things, but we will touch base on some of the other picks and some of the other drama, especially the Shedeur Sanders, kind of sliding issue that happened there. So, Nick, let's talk about the Chiefs 2025 draft class. We know that they had a plethora of picks through rounds 1 through 7. So let's kind of break it down a little bit. Let's go pick by pick. We started off with pick 31. And when I was watching, I know that I was very surprised when I seen that ticker come across the bottom saying the Philadelphia Eagles have traded with the Chiefs. I was kind of like, what is going on? And we swapped picks. The Chiefs end up getting, I think, 164 later in the 5th round. So it worked out because the Chiefs got who they wanted in Josh Simmons. But I was a little confused at first. I was like, why would we trade with the team that we just lost to in the Super Bowl? But I think it was a good option for the Chiefs because they got that extra pick. And it made sense. The Eagles got who they wanted. The Chiefs got who they wanted. So it was kind of like a win-win for both teams. Doesn't really hurt either way. But Josh Simmons, let's talk about him. Big left tackle out of Ohio State. Give me your thoughts. Let's talk about him. I think we kind of both thought that the Chiefs were going to go that way. A lot of the mock drafts had the Chiefs taking Josh Simmons there at that later first round pick. But give me your thoughts on him and what do you think he could do for the Chiefs?
Yeah, I mean, I know that a lot of people had him, going to the Chiefs, like you said. He was definitely someone we had on our radar, and then thought that he might fall to us. So I'm sure that the front office is ecstatic to get him. We talked about even just last week, and we've talked in the past. Just bolstering up the offensive line and how much we need to protect Patrick Mahomes in order to be able to make this kind of progress. And that left tackle position was just an Achilles heel for us. And at this point now, we've got some really nice depth in the tackle position. And by all accounts, everybody says this guy could have been like a top 15 pick if not for his injury. So if the risk pays off, then we are going to have at least one steal in this first round, and for a position that we desperately sort of needed to fill. So I think I'm excited about it. We talked about it as it was happening, and it's like it's not a sexy pick. It's not one of those ones that everybody's going to get super excited about. Not a lot of people are going to buy his jersey, probably, at least not off the bat. But it's definitely what we need. It was a team need, and we filled that. And so I'm excited about it from all the videos and highlights I've seen and all of this footage. He looks like he could be a monster. The exact guy that we need there if he plays to his full potential. So I'm excited to see what we can get out of him. And, obviously the more time Patrick's got in the pocket, the more he can make those magical plays that he has and step back and throw it deep. So it just opens up a whole plethora of options if we can just have a little bit of time.
Yeah. I think going back to the, you saying the sexy pick, we were kind of hoping for a much sexier pick or even D line, I think would have been what a lot of people would have leaned to just because of some of the struggles there and not getting to the pass rush. So, but from what I've seen on Josh Simmons, he is regarded as if he did not get injured and this injury wasn't a looming kind of cloud over his head, he would have been the best tackle in this draft. Yeah, so it wasn't a sexy pick. We thought D line or a playmaker. We talked about Luther Burden a little bit. But I think the Chiefs got their future. We did have this conversation last year, though. With Kingsley, we thought he was going to be the left tackle for the Chiefs for the next 10 years, and so we took the guy that we needed in the moment. And I think Beach did a very good job throughout this draft, getting positional needs and getting guys that probably were slipped a little bit and had great value and great upside. But that torn patella that he has is kind of a cloud over his head, and this could be a project pick. He might not be able to come in right away and be the starting left tackle that Mahomes needs. He might have to sit a year, or he might have to sit half the season. Who knows? But I think the Chiefs put themselves in good position to do that because of the offseason moves they made, getting more from the 49ers, where he could play left tackle. He might be able to play right tackle as well. And then also having Kingsley, who we think might play left guard, but who knows? He might even try to say, I'm the left tackle for this team and try to win it in camp. So I think there's a lot of different pieces. And like you brought up the depth, I think the Chiefs did a very good job of getting a guy that they can at least have in the depth and add that depth for Mahomes. And no matter how the puzzle fits, guys will be able to move around. You still have Ryan Morris, who's kind of a swing tackle as well. So you've got a bunch of different guys that you can fill in and play. But overall, I think this was probably the best pick of the night for the Chiefs, just because of the struggles that they dealt with. And over the last 3 or 4 years where they've had to deal with these looming injuries in Super Bowls, and they've kind of put Band-Aids over them throughout the years. So hopefully, in Beach we trust, but hopefully this Simmons pick turns out to be something that isn't just a Band-Aid. We need a resolution. We need to be healed from this kind of concern that's been going on over the last 4 or 5 years, where we can't figure out who's going to be the starting left tackle for years to come. Okay, so let's talk about the second pick. The Chiefs then had a pick at second round, 63rd pick. This was one of their picks that they had. They did a lot of trading, so we'll get into those as the trades happened throughout the night as we go through each pick. But it was Omarr Norman-Lott, D tackle out of Tennessee. So earlier I mentioned kind of the struggles of the D-line, and we thought maybe the Chiefs in the first round might try to take the best D tackle or edge. But in the second round here, we got an SEC guy that kind of is going to be the fill-in for Tershawn Wharton. He's going to come in and take over that second D tackle or third D tackle spot. We had Derek Nottie leave, we had Wharton leave, and it's kind of a position that is not filled currently. I think there's still some moves that need to be made and guys that need to be brought in. I know Mike Pennell's back, but overall, there's still a lot of D-line spots that need to be taken. And so I think this was a positional need pick more than anything. Again, it's not a very sexy pick. But we know he has a quick first step, his rushing ability. He didn't have too many sacks, but you can't expect that much from a D-line anyway. But coming from a big school, Tennessee, playing in the SEC, playing against future NFL linemen, I think it was a great pick. Sitting there at pick 63 with the idea that Chiefs had other picks coming up, and we'll get into those other ones. But as far as this pick, I think it was a great pick.
I just want to clarify so we don't get canceled. Somebody takes a clip out of context. We're not talking about, body shaming these guys when we're calling them not sexy. Okay. We're not talking about their physical form. I'm not saying in one way or another. So, we just got to clarify that. But no, I totally agree with everything you said. And I think definitely, it's one of those things like in the Super Bowl, this draft really feels like we learn from our mistakes, hopefully, if everybody plays out right. And not just drafting for, the best skill position, flashy. It felt like a smart draft in response to the weaknesses that we had on the big stage. And so, one, obviously being the offensive tackle, how Philadelphia's line sort of just, blew us up. We had no time. But then learning from that also, I think, we want to bolster our defensive line so that we can have that sort of presence against another team as well, right? Like if we can't get the offense going, at least we're going to be as disruptive as the other defense is. And we got to take cues from, Philadelphia, because they were able to do that so effectively against us. And it completely disrupted our whole game plan, just playing the front four, not even blitzing, and we couldn't do anything about it. Just having that strong foundational, D line in the trenches makes a total difference. So I think a lot of teams took that cue, and I think we're no exception. I think Veach definitely is drafting in that, and you can see it in just this pick and the next pick. We're strengthening that D line and just trying to get some guys that can rotate, make an impact, and just be disruptive. So I really think that they saw the areas that we needed to prove in from the Super Bowl, and we made picks to show that.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I liked what you said about this being it was a draft that was just drafting the needs more than anything. A lot of times it's best player available, or it's, skill heavy, where you're just looking for the best guy with the best skills, trying to get him in. This was a positional draft that was filling gaps, filling pieces that where you need a lot of guys. When we're getting offensive line, we're getting defensive line. You have a lot of guys rotating in and out, and you have to replenish those positions all the time. And we'll get into, later down the road with receiver and corner that we took as well. They replenished a lot of pieces that kind of filter in quite a bit. And so let's jump to the third pick, where we had Ashton Gillette, D end out of Louisville, with the 66th pick in round 3. So this was the pick from the Tennessee Titans from the L'Jarius Sneed trade. So we turned it into this D end who, from what I see, he's a freak. I mean, he looks like he's just a complete freak coming off the edge. And so he's got high motor with good pass rushing skills. I think that I saw something where his mom is his kind of strength trainer. So that's pretty cool. Little fun fact about him. And I think his dad has been a diehard Chiefs fan and kind of manifested this being picked by the Chiefs. So that cool fun fact about him. But I mean, again, this is just another needed position where the Chiefs are on the lower end when it comes to sacks. As far as, we can count on Chris Jones to get his 8 to 10 a year, but that's the D tackle position. We're kind of hoping that George Karlaftis, turned it up a notch, and he did last year, but we don't have that dominant pass rusher that, like you mentioned, can change the game. We just got some pretty rotational guys. So we're looking for someone to come in and be that 10, 11, 12, 15 sacks per year kind of guy. And I'm not saying this guy will be, but I don't want to put that, pressure on him coming straight off from the draft. But again, I think this is another position where you have to have 5, 6 guys who are capable. And we have a young group of guys with FAU, George Karlaftis, bringing Gillette in here. These are guys that are going to rotate through. You're going to see, swapping, every play, every other play, getting fresh legs in. I think that's real important, as we saw, like you said, with the Eagles. And this is a copycat league. We are going to do everything we can. And so we're probably going to worry about the pass rush and getting to the quarterback, because if you can stop an offense, then a lot of times your defense, it makes it easier on your defense when you can stop the offense. Corners don't have to be guarding receivers as long. Linebackers don't have to stay on tight ends as long. So there's a lot of benefits when we can get a pass rush and actually get to the quarterback without having to do some crazy blitzes that Spags has to draw up, pulling McDuffie off the edge or anything like that. If we can actually get a stable pass rush where we're rushing 4 or 5 and make it consistent, I mean, I think this team just gets elevated to an entire new level.
Yeah, I totally agree. I really like, what you said there. And people may know by the time that we put this out, but actually he already is like knows and I think is at least acquaintances with George Karlaftis, actually. So there's going to be already that chemistry, that sort of, I'm sure, Furious George, he's going to, want to help out, his guy and bring him along. And if there's anybody I think that's perfect for that is him, because he's every single year since he's been drafted, he's gotten measurably better. So if he could just show him what he has done, and kind of take him under his wing, and show that the young kid what you need to do to be effective in this league, then to your point, we've got real nasty defensive line that can really make an impact in the games. And also like, while I agree to your point, like I feel like it would be nice to have that sort of like standout name at DN like a lot of other teams have. I would, on the flip side, I also would be, I mean, I'd be totally okay with like the other part of what you said, and just having guys that can come in and out and like fresh, and everybody's splitting the basically splitting the check when it comes to sacks and disrupting the backfield and everything. And I don't know what they would feel about that as far as getting a paycheck in the future. But I mean, as far as for your team goals, I think that's best case scenario is there's not one guy that you can just double team and stop. You got to worry about four, and then they switch in and out. You know what I mean? So I really would love to see that, just keeping like fresh rotations, and anybody that's in there can really be disruptive. So I'm looking forward to, again, the depth that we're getting in the defensive line.
Yeah, no, I think that was a great point about like contracts and things like that with sacks, and having that idea where, yeah, you could have these fresh legs, B plus rushers who you can just keep filtering in, versus having that A plus top of the market DN that you have to pay, and they're not cheap. And we know that the Chiefs, previously drafted very well, so they've had to pay a lot of these guys at top of the market. So I think that that's a great point, is that if we could just have that rotation of 4 or 5, and I think your point about Karlaftis taking that next step, I think FAU is going to take a next step, and hopefully Gillette could come in and just be kind of at the status quo, or pick up pretty fast where these guys are and get up to NFL speed. But I think going forward, it would be great just to have those fresh set of legs. It would help more than anything. It would help Chris Jones, where Chris Jones could get back into his dominance and not being double teamed and triple teamed. And then we might be able to use Norman-Lott and him coming in too and being another fresh set of legs, a guy that can get to the quarterback. Like I said, he didn't have that many sacks, but from film, he looked like he could. He's quick for a guy his size. He looks pretty quick. So I think being able to draft D line and getting those early, because some of these other guys, these skill positions, and from here on out, we almost went all skill position for the rest of the draft except linebacker. Skills positions are, I don't want to say a dime a dozen, but you can find a lot of guys who can do something with the football more than you can somebody who can get you 2 sacks a game. And so I think going the trenches early was super important, and I'm really glad Veach made those picks. Again, they weren't sexy, but they are so needed for a team that kind of struggled on both sides of that trench line with the O-line and the D-line. But let's get into some of the sexy picks now as we get into the skill positions. So
no Diddy.
No Diddy at all. So let's start with the guy out of California. So the Chiefs did have pick 95, and then again they made another trade and they actually moved up 10 spots and moved up to pick 85. So the end of the third round, we're pretty close to. And they picked Noel Williams out of California, big cornerback, DB, and the best thing that he was is he's a ball hawk. He led the FBS last year, I think, with 7 interceptions, had a few pick sixes. This guy just seems to be a magnet for the ball. So that is something that was super important. We had talked about maybe, we mentioned Kobe Bryant, or we thought maybe there was a couple other cornerbacks that will get targeted. And we know that Veach has drafted very well historically at the cornerback position. So we knew that a cornerback was coming. But from what I've seen, this guy is the real deal as far as size and speed and the ability to get the ball. That is something that's most important. I seen a graphic that was like the last 5 years, who's been the top interception getter for the Chiefs, and ever since Tyrann Mathieu has gone, the Chiefs haven't had that 5 interception season plus from a DB. It's usually about 2 or 3 is the max that a guy has gotten. It was a couple years of Tyrann Mathieu, and then it was a couple years of L'Jarius Sneed, who led the Chiefs in interceptions. And then last year was actually Jaden Hicks, who, shout out to him. He had a great year for being a backup and ended up with 3 interceptions. But they don't have that's just not the style of defense that they play, is a guy that goes gets the ball. And so getting a guy here in the third round where you're trading up for him, obviously you see something about him that you like, and I'm sure it's his versatility. I'm sure it's his size. And the ability to get the ball is important, and getting the ball back. That's something, like I said, the Chiefs their defense is notorious for making stops, but they're not notorious for getting the ball. And that is a game changer when your offense may be struggling, or even if you're not struggling, getting the ball back is just as important or more important than getting a stop, because you're getting more possessions for your offense. So I love this pick. Again, I really wanted Kobe Bryant, and I thought, and surprisingly, side note, he did not get drafted, which I couldn't believe that. I've seen a lot of people who were kind of like really confused on why he wasn't picked. They at least thought he would go in like that 3rd to 5th round range, and then he didn't even get drafted at all. That was really confusing. But shout out to Noah Williams, because I think he's going to step right in and be in the rotation for at least that cornerback 4, cornerback 5. He might not get a lot of playing time this year, or if he's a complete stud, and shows out in training camp, that would be awesome. But the Chiefs are very good at replenishing those skill positions, and they're kind of, I think, forward thinkers. We talked last week about the Trent McDuffie situation, and do we think that the Chiefs would pay Trent McDuffie, or do we think, it's kind of like a more of a L'Jarius Sneed situation? And not saying McDuffie doesn't deserve the money, but this, at least in my opinion, puts in that position that the Chiefs are kind of leaning towards. Maybe we will be okay without him, McDuffie, just because, again, you can't pay everybody. You can't pay when you draft so well and you've got guys who are getting top market money. I don't know if you can just sit there and pay everybody. There's only so much money to go around, especially when you're paying Mahomes, $50 or $60 million a year. So I think they're forward thinkers, and they know that they have to make a decision next offseason when it comes to McDuffie, or even during the season when there were, extension talks. So going 3rd round on a corner makes me think that they know that they have a fork in the road that's coming up, and they have to make a decision. And so this is a safety net of getting another guy in. They brought in Fulton from the Chargers over the offseason and free agency. So they're kind of bolstering this cornerback position, not because it was a looming, factor in the Chiefs. It wasn't really at all. Nick, okay, your mic was like going crazy.
Oh, it was?
Yeah. Not like it was a looming factor for the Chiefs at all. As far as their cornerback play, Jalen Watson was hurt over the season, and that was contributing to it a little bit, but their cornerback play has been very good. So this makes me think getting Noah Williams is a forward-thinking move more than anything in a depth position that is needed coming forward.
Yeah, just to add to your point real quick, even when we had that great duo of Sneed and McDuffie, Sneed had I think he ended up with only 1 touchdown thrown on him that year, and McDuffie was locking it down too. But we didn't get a lot of takeaways. And, that's something that I know you and I have sort of reminisced about when we had Marcus Peters back in the day. And, he wasn't the best tackler by any means. And didn't, sometimes he did get burnt, but he did get the ball back a lot. And that's huge, especially when you have, potentially the best quarterback in the league. You want to get him back the ball, right?
Right.
And doing, whatever we can, to get turnovers is huge. So I'm really hoping that, his skills can translate to the next level. Of course, it's going to be a learning curve, but yeah, excited to hopefully get some turnovers, looking this year.
So let's go to the fourth round pick, and this was at pick 133. And so um, this was, I think the Chiefs had this pick as well still, yeah, because they traded for the fifth round. So this was still one of their picks that they had. And this was not a surprising pick because we thought that the Chiefs would go skill position. We were texting when it was the first round. We're like Luther Burden, like, and we know the Chiefs need wide receiver depth. We know that they need skill players. When you have Mahomes, you got to have players that can make plays. And so you've got a young receiver core with Rashee Rice, Xavier Worthy. You brought back Hollywood Brown, and you brought back Juju, a couple veteran guys. But you still need depth, and you still need guys that are playmakers that can make plays. We know that there's a looming suspension over Rashee Rice's season. We think nothing has been confirmed, or we don't have any dates yet, but we're assuming that there is going to be some kind of suspension, maybe 4 to 6 games. So to get a guy that is Jalen Royals, who shout out to the Royals. I actually hope this guy makes the roster because I really want his jersey because I just think that's pretty cool for the Kansas City Royals. It'd be a pretty cool jersey to have. So this guy is, from what I've seen, they're saying this might be the steal of the draft period. The experts are saying that this is one of the crazier picks, and giving Mahomes just another weapon is crazy. This guy's, I think, 6 foot, like 205. He's not like a jump ball guy. He's get him the ball. He's a deep threat where I've seen a lot of highlights from his Utah State days where it was a lot of deep balls thrown to him, but he also was making a lot of plays where he's taking, the ball, making moves and going 50 yards off a 5 to 10 yard pass. So this guy seems to be a playmaker. I think he ran a 4.4, if I'm remembering correctly, on his 40-yard dash. And so he had a very good college career, and I'm excited that they've added another young receiver where we'll get to see Rice, Worthy, and Royals grow together over the next couple years. And I think that's awesome, giving Mahomes like this 3-headed young monster where Rice, coming off an injury, is going to be, I think, better than he was starting last season. Worthy, who came off an incredible rookie year and played an amazing Super Bowl, and just that, 40-yard dash record holder, the speed that he brings. And now Jalen Royals, who a lot of people think he is a great guy with his hands, fast, physical. I've seen a highlight of him at the Senior Bowl practice where he's throwing corners around. I mean, this guy seems to be the steal of the draft, and I'm just very excited because I'm sure Mahomes is itching to get to training camp to see what this guy can do.
Yeah, and he set Utah State's single season touchdown record. So this guy knows how to find the end zone, and that's what we need. It's kind of what we've been, I wouldn't say we've been missing it exactly. We don't have that explosiveness as of late. And so hopefully just adding another weapon that knows how to find the end zone. We know, just to reiterate your point, that Rice is going to be coming along nicely. Worthy's coming off a great rookie year who, hopefully will only get better. And then you got the veteran guys in Juju and Hollywood. So, looking at that just on paper looks really nice. It looks really explosive for sure. I would say that would describe the receiver room right now. So I'm looking forward to what we can do in developing him for sure.
Yeah, I'm very excited because Mahomes, I don't think, has had, and we talked about this a little bit last year, where Mahomes didn't have the weapons that he's had since this last year's team, and I think this one is better.
Yeah.
Getting Royals, you have Hollywood back, who is going to have a vengeance season coming off an injury. Rice is coming back coming off of an injury. Worthy is growing another step. I am super excited for the offense, and just coming off a Super Bowl loss too. Mahomes getting the haircut, like they are coming for vengeance, and I think I would love, and I don't know if that these days are gone yet, but I would love if Mahomes came out with like another 50 touchdown season, and this offense was back at 2018 style, where we're throwing 50-yard bombs and it's all about the offense. I would love that. I know that's kind of like, gone in the past and a lot harder. as teams have got to study and know how the Chiefs play. And but giving this many weapons where you got any time on the field, you're going to have Travis Kelce, you're going to have Hollywood, Xavier, Rashee Rice, Royals, or Juju. That 5-man rotation of receivers is honestly got to be one of the better ones in the league.
And I mean, Noah Gray started coming along really nicely last year. Let me just add that in there too.
Yeah. We and Noah Gray, and then we haven't even got to, but you got Pacheco coming back, who he came off injury last year, wasn't the greatest that we thought, but he's going to come back with a vengeance. He's in a contract year. You bring in Elijah Mitchell. You got weapons. Kareem Hunt. We got our red zone. Like this offense, especially with bringing in O-line, I would be disappointed if this offense wasn't if Mahomes is not throwing 4,000 for 40 or 30, 38, I don't know what it is at that point. I don't know if it's coaching. I don't know. These are the weapons. This is the time where the offense needs to take it back to 2018.
Dude, you're getting me hyped right now, man.
I'm just
ready.
saying.
I'm ready. I needed this hope. I needed this spark to look forward to. So, and the way you just, man, he's spitting right now.
I'm just saying we are at that point where there's no more excuses. We've gone through these Super Bowls where we thought maybe this was a rebuild year, and somewhat it is. You could call this draft a rebuild draft because we're filling positions of need. But the Chiefs aren't going to just lay down. They're not just laying down to. They're going to come back. Mahomes is coming back with a vengeance. Mahomes got that dog in him. It's not like he doesn't have the dog in him. He's coming. Him and Travis. Travis is going to go on a farewell tour, but it's not like he wants to go out on top. It's not like he's going to lay down either.
Hey, in the words of Primetime, we ain't coming. We brick walls, watch out everywhere. I'm ready to run through one, man. Let's go.
Well, speaking of running through brick walls, this is actually one of the if I had to give like my most underrated pick, the Chiefs' 5th round pick. So when they made the trade with Philly, they got a 5th round, I think 164, and then they ended up making another trade where they traded up to 156. So there's been kind of a theme that trades were happening and Beach was being aggressive, but this 5th round pick is Jeffrey Bassa, I think is how you pronounce it. And he's a linebacker out of Oregon. So some things about him that I thought were very important is he's a converted safety to linebacker. So he is, just from like a first glance, he did look a little undersized when it came to linebacker, but he is specifically like a coverage linebacker. He claims he can be a 3-down linebacker, which I love the confidence. But his skill set and his strengths are really just his coverage skills, converting from safety to linebacker. I've seen some plays where he shot the gap, made tackles for loss, things like that. But I love the idea of bringing in a coverage guy where you and I both know Nick Bolton struggles heavily when it comes to coverage and on 3rd downs and things like that. Tranquil's been kind of that fill-in guy for the coverage. So getting another guy that can come in who I think Spags is going to have a heyday with this dude. We know he loves blitzing off the edge, having the speed. So I think using different coverages, I could see this guy. Last year they brought the switch where Tranquil switched out to safety on a play. He lined up at linebacker, and then they blitzed off the edge and threw Tranquil back in safety. This guy right here, I think, is like the perfect package for Spags, like chess match moves on his design. He's going to use this guy to throw off so many quarterbacks because his ability to flip from linebacker to safety and then safety back to linebacker. So I'm very excited. I know Spags was excited as well on this pick. And that's, I think, the reason why they traded up, I think 8 or 9 picks after acquiring that pick from the Eagles to get this guy.
Yeah. And we've coincidentally talked a lot about Jaden Hicks in this podcast. But
Shout
as
out
you
to
know,
Jaden Hicks.
Yeah, shout out Jaden Hicks. But as you know, Z, and I think I mentioned this right after in our draft recap from last year, and fortunately I ended up it ended up coming true and all that. But he was like my favorite, like you said, underrated, under the radar. Like I have a really good feeling about this guy on our team for Jaden Hicks. I mean, he came along great, and this is the pick for this year. Like I just love his like he just got kind of has like that freak athleticism where again he can play coverage, but he can play downhill as well. And we've kind of needed that. To your point, Nick Bolton is second to none in that downhill, stopping the run. Even kind of getting to the pass rush. But when he's got to drop back, it's a bit of his weakness. And ever since letting go of Willie Gay, we haven't had that sort of linebacker that could do both. And I think Tranquil, to your point, is good in the coverage, and he can hit too. But just adding another guy with his size and his athleticism, I just think he has like a tremendous upside. He reminds me of just, again, like those kind of hybrid players that are out there, and I mean, may be wrong in like comparing to these people, and it may not be the right comparison, but I just think of like the versatile players that can do it all. Like I think of like a, Kyle Hamilton on the Ravens, or like Devin White when he was in the Tampa Bay. Like just
Devin White is like the perfect description of what this guy is.
Yeah, and obviously I know Hamilton is more like coverage and all that, but like he can come down and hit too, and like he just those players that you just need that right now. These crazy athletes to keep up with the speed and skill set that like the tight ends are coming with these days. And you got big receivers in the league, multiple receivers on a team usually that can get big plays. So you got to have not only your DBs locked down, but you got to have a good coverage linebacker. So I'm really excited. And again, this is going to be like my I'm hoping he sort of pays off. Sort of we talked about Royals being maybe the steal of the draft as a whole, but like technically, I feel like I want to place my chips on like this being our steal. Where like fifth round, you're not gonna normally expect that something huge from this, but I'm excited. Let me just say that.
Yeah, and another note I just realized too is Chenal. Chenal is who Leo Chenal has come on as one of the best kind of hybrid linebackers, where he kind of does it all. He pass rushes, he sits in the box. He's a freak athlete. His contract is coming up, and so the Chiefs are going to have to replenish that, whether they pay him or he's just too expensive to bring back. Deservingly so. This is a guy that you're kind of just putting more bodies into those positions. And that's why I think this was another great draft by Beach, just because it's a forward thinking draft. You got to think about, can we pay these guys? Are they going to be able to, take a hometown deal, or are we going to have to replace them? And so just having those bodies available and picking athletes and guys that are actually can contribute, I think was another key reason why they took Jeffrey Bassa. So let's go to the final pick. I know Rashee Rice loves this pick. Pony up is what I think I think that's SMU's slogan. So Brashard Smith, 7th round pick, pick 228 out of SMU. So the Chiefs did have a couple 7th round picks with trading up. They got him away, and they kind of moved around a little bit, but they did trade up, I believe, to get this guy as well. And so this guy, Brashard Smith, is a sub 4.4 40, ran a 4.39 if I'm not mistaken. And this guy is a converted receiver to running back. And honestly, he is, if the Chiefs did not pick Pacheco in the 7th round and he did not turn out to be what he is, this might be a sweep under the rug pick, like just another running back, who cares? But you have to kind of look at the track record of Veach and what he's done in those later rounds, and why every pick matters now, almost because of how things have turned out. So that's why I'm excited about this pick, is because I think this guy can develop into be the Jerick McKinnon for the Chiefs, or the just like that 3rd down home run screen speedster back that can fill in where you have kind of that tandem of a hard running, grind it running back, and then this guy's more of an elusive receiving kind of. And I'm sure he still can run the ball. I've seen highlights where he is very versatile when in the open field. He has good moves where it spins, jukes, things like that. He's very explosive. I've seen, he's taken a lot of the just plays that should not look like they've gone anywhere and turned them into 20, 50-yard gains. So I am excited for this guy. We did talk a little bit about Pacheco and trying to replace that running back. We thought about maybe Devin Neal or Giddens, who they were drafted roughly about 60 to 80 picks, somewhere in that fifth round-ish. So the Chiefs weren't as aggressive as we thought they would be when it came to getting a running back. Some people even thought they would go round 2 and maybe get like one of the guys out of Ohio State or something like that. But they end up just doing what they did a few years ago with Pacheco and finding a super athlete, that a guy that can they think can make plays. And they take him in the 7th round. He's a gadget guy, and I could see him being used in just as we talked about Bossa being that linebacker safety hybrid. I think Brashard Smith here could be that running back wide receiver gadget guy. Like I'm sure Andy Reid's going to have a heyday with this dude.
I don't know why. I just thought of, and I don't even know if their play style is comparable. I'll have to, kind of look at more comparisons between the two. But, as far as being a smaller back, used to play receiver and running back on the Chiefs. I'm talking about Dexter McCluster, back in the day. And maybe his career didn't pan out, exactly how, he or some of the fans would have thought. But it kind of brings that sort of memory back of having a running back who was lining up in the slot a lot of times. And, it's funny that, it's not funny. It's just right on brand, I should say, that we would pick a running back that used to play wide out, because everybody knows if you're going to play in Andy Reid's offense and you're running back, you better catch the ball, and you have to catch the ball. Like that's just a requirement of being, a running back in his offense. And so, just to add into all the points that you made already, whether it's special teams, adding explosiveness, or, as far as all those weapons we talked about, adding another weapon, or depth, to the running back room and to the skill players room on offense, just having that depth and next man up mentality where, you can plug in a guy. And it's kind of, there was times I feel like last year and when we've been at our best, it was like, you could think about doubling somebody, but then you leave, so many other weapons open. And that's what we really want, is to be able to, just have this diversity of skills on the offense and, make it impossible for anybody to double one person, because you're going to leave so many, other options open and so many other weapons open. So, I'm a fan of it. I knew, we both kind of knew, and a lot of people had us grabbing a running back, like you said. We sort of thought earlier, and some of those guys that, we had talked about, like Neal or Giddens. I liked Skedibo, but
I remember texting you when he got drafted by the Giants. I just sent RIP.
I know. I'm excited to see what he does in New York, but yeah, no, I'm excited about this guy as well. I'm excited about Brashard Smith and what he can do. And, if there's one guy that can, maximize the skill set of players, is Andy Reid and his coaching staff and style. So, and having Patrick Mahomes, makes a tremendous difference to your ability as a running back or receiver or tight end, because he's going to find a way to get you the ball, and it's, going to be accurate, and he's going to elevate the game of everybody around him. So someone who's a 7th round pick, as you said with Pacheco, you definitely have a place in this offense if you work toward it. So looking forward to this guy's future with us.
Yeah, absolutely. I think he, if he gets a shot, I think he will turn out to be, we keep saying the steal of the draft, but Pacheco that year probably was one of the steals of his draft. This could be something similar as to being the steal of the draft. So let's pivot a little bit. Let's talk about Shedeur Sanders a little bit here. He's kind of been all over the sports world news. In recent memory, I've been following, the draft and sports for, in my entire life, from what I can remember. And this, we talked about it a little bit, but this is probably the biggest fall of a top prospect, if we want to call him, in the history of the NFL draft. Some of the more recent ones that I can remember they weren't even close to this size, but was like Brady Quinn. He fell 20-ish spots where he was projected, to go top 5, I think, and he fell. So this was one of those scenarios where even, some people thought he wasn't a first round talent, Shedeur Sanders, even if they thought he was a second round. But he fell so far. And I don't know if it was a mixture of his interviews and really just he, gave off this arrogant kind of I'm Deion's son and I can do what I want, or if experts overvalued him and people really behind the scenes in the NFL, like in the NFL world, they knew that he is not a good quarterback. I don't know if it was that. I don't know if it's a mixture of all these things, but to go being in mock drafts and I saw a graphic when he was drafted, it was like the 27 mock drafts of the experts around, like I think on ESPN and all the different, sports sources had him the latest. They all had like an average draft position of 29th. Like that was the lowest one. A lot of them were like 21st or, somewhere around there. Him to fall to 144th in the 5th round, it's got to be bigger than his play. I think it's got to be bigger than. I could say it's probably bigger than Deion being his dad. I think there's a plethora of mixture of things that are contributing to this. And side note, this is not a political podcast, so we're not going to discuss anything politically wise. But I'm sure there's a little bit of mixture of that too. But to stay on the sports side of things, just his skill set, I think he's better than a 5th round, 144th overall pick, in my opinion, at least.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I mean, like, I find it strange in a way. Like, I would love to, see, and I've seen one article about it. Again, nobody knows the validity of it, but I would love to be like a fly on the wall, or if there's tapes, as to see like how these interviews could have gone. That they've been so bad that the drastic change of potential first round at one point potential top 10 pick to on the flip side of it, falling all the way to the 5th round, kind of like a throwaway pick. Obviously all the memes are like, it's kind of like a here, damn, kind of like like here, fine, we'll pick it, but like, and it's just crazy. Like, that's just like what it felt like in a sense. Like, after a certain point, it was like, is he even gonna get drafted? Like, is there something, again, I just don't know what it could have been, because I will say that, like, I don't agree that he maybe should have been like a top 10 pick. I don't know that he should have been a 1st round pick. I'm not 100% sure on that. I think that a little bit of the national media kind of boosted that up because he's a marketable guy, because he's Deion's son. At the same time, from what I've watched his games, he's made some good plays, and like, he definitely looks like someone that, like, you could coach up. And maybe that's the problem, is he's not, maybe like they don't feel like he's coachable or something. But like, in a perfect world, you could coach him up and he could be a very solid quarterback in the NFL. I don't, maybe upside, is, or his ceiling, I should say, is maybe limited potentially, but definitely not to the sense of like, he's not horrible. I will not, hear any takes that like, oh, he sucks. Like, he doesn't suck. I saw this It's like somebody was throwing Travis Hunter the ball. You know what I mean? And it was him. And it's like, you know, his record at Colorado wasn't great. You know, didn't have all the numbers and everything that you'd like to see, but again, I don't think that he sucks or that he's horrible. And I will say this, like, potentially Cleveland Browns make the biggest steal of the draft, because they were thinking about getting him, you know, or there was projections that they would get him in the first round, and to be able to boost your team up and get a ton of other guys and then still get him, you know, that could be an insane steal.
Well, as we're watching the draft, it's like, oh, Browns pick at 33. Oh, they'll take him there. Oh, they pick at 37. They'll take him there. And we just keep looking. And we're like, okay, where can Shedeur go? Me and you are just looking at like the future picks. Like, okay, can he go here? Okay, the Raiders are coming up here. Browns are here. And it's like he just kept going and going. And I think you hit it right on the head when it came to the Browns. I think if he turns out to be what his projections are, at least from these experts, they definitely got the seal of the draft, and they by far had the best draft out of anybody, because they'll end up with a starting caliber quarterback in the 5th round. And you know, he has a shot. He has a shot to compete. There is a little bit of question of why they drafted Dylan Gabriel. If they, you know, thought that they could get Shedeur later. I think I saw an interview saying they didn't think he would be there, Shedeur, that late, and they kind of just it kind of reminds me of the meme that you're saying. They're kind of like, oh, we'll take him. But like at the same time, it's almost like they couldn't pass on him. And there was a point where I thought, like, you know, what is the point you get to where, like, for instance, the Chiefs, like, what pick do you get to where the Chiefs would could pass on him? You know, like, is it like the 6th round pick where it's like he's still there? Like, do you just, because I feel like if you gave him a shot in the preseason, he showed some glimpse, you flip him for a 5th round pick. You know what I mean? Like there were so many options that were running through my head. I'm like, where's this dude going to go? And to your point, there was a point I thought he wasn't getting drafted. And I thought it was the mixture of things that we talked about, where it was, you know, the skill set, the people that don't like him, and all of it. I think there was a point where I was like, I don't think he's getting drafted, because I could not believe he didn't go at least rounds 2 through 4.
Right.
And then one of the biggest guys in the draft, this was something too that I just found hilarious. Watching the draft, he is the biggest name, potentially second biggest name to Travis Hunter in the draft. And when he's drafted, it's like on commercial. And, you know, you don't get to see that he's drafted until, like, you know, you don't get to see his reaction. And of course, he was at home and he didn't go to the green room or anything like that, which, side note, that would have been super embarrassing if he went to the green room and didn't get drafted till day 3.
Yeah.
But, and that's what's crazy, is I'm sure he was invited to the green room. Like, just thinking about that now, he probably was invited to the green room, didn't go, wanted to, you know, do something with his family. But he was drafted on like a commercial, and you didn't see it till after he was drafted. And it seems weird. Like, the whole situation seems weird. And it seems like he's just being somewhat blackballed for, being, and like I said, I would love to be a fly on the wall and hear what was going on, but you never know. And to speak on his skill set, he is like an average to above average, like, play style quarterback, where he's not like this super freak athlete, doesn't have a super freak arm. But I think his ability to place the ball, I think his IQ, I think he's a very high IQ quarterback when it comes to where to throw the ball. You know, those things you can't teach necessarily right away. Those are things that, like, a lot of like top tier quarterbacks have at a young age. And I could see why he would fall to rounds 2 through 4, because he has those, but he doesn't have the athletic, you know, God gifted talents of a super arm or being super fast. You know, that's why Jalen Milroe, that guy's not super talented. He's a great quarterback out of Alabama, and he went to the Seahawks, but they took him because I think his athletic ability. He's a guy that he has a solid to above average arm, but he was a freak athlete when it came to speed and being able to run the ball. So Shedeur didn't have those kind of potential upside skill sets. And so I see that's why he would fall out of the first round. We thought he would go 21, and if he didn't go 21, he was definitely going second, maybe third round. And we always thought like, okay, the Browns will just get him round 2 or round 3. But so I see why. But to fall to the 5th round pick, he competes with the Browns have 5 quarterbacks on the roster right now. They got Joe Flacco, Kenny Pickett, Dylan Gabriel, Deshaun Watson, and Shedeur Sanders, which I think Deshaun Watson's not playing a snap in the NFL probably again. So it's really 4 quarterbacks. They bring in Joe Flacco, who, you're just kind of putting in to hold a spot. And if Kenny Pickett maybe wins the starting job, it's really Shedeur is fighting for maybe QB3 right now. And potentially in a year could be QB2 to QB1. Like he could win the job. So he went into a great position, honestly, a team that is not very good, but drafted good pieces, made good decisions in the draft. And so I'm excited for him on that end. But this whole situation is mind boggling to me.
Yeah. There's like a storytelling element to it that could be really cool. Just from, storylines and the way that, and I don't mean that in the sense of like a script, but what I mean is that like,
it's scripted.
Yeah. This is what they're writing, but, if the records are to be believed, and he sort of had a little bit of an arrogant mindset, big ego, all of those things, and that's why he, in part why he fell. In a sense, I'm strictly not saying that what the NFL owners or GMs did was right, but that's just the way that it played out. He ended up in the most like prove it scenario. If you are this dude, if you are legendary, if you are as bad as you think you are, then come into the Cleveland Browns, notoriously for being, so bad for so long now. In a room, what you just said, 5 QBs you got to go up against. One is a veteran, one is like a former, relatively high draft pick in Kenny Pickett, who's got something to prove, and then another one from your own draft class that got drafted before you. You got to beat out all 3 of those guys, and then you got to take the Cleveland Browns. Ideally, you take the Cleveland Browns to the next level, and in a small market where you're not going to have the distractions, because like part of it was I kept thinking, Las Vegas would be a good fit for him in the sense of like the style of the Raiders. They just have that style, and he brings a certain marketability and like swagger, so that it fits, right? But at the same time, then you've been in Las Vegas. There's lots of distractions, lots of other things that you could get into off the field. In Cleveland, all they got is football and sports, and so like if you can't do it there, then then the rumors are true, or whatever. Or you have this amazing chance to prove to yourself and to your group, to your haters also, that like that he's him, and that he can take the Cleveland Browns in the 5th round pick with a chip on his shoulder, beat out these other quarterbacks and elevate them to the next level. Then we're talking, and just think about that story, you know what I mean? Like, and additionally, maybe in that process, if it is true that he was arrogant, also was humbled at the same time to see that, like, all right, I gotta lock in, and like, I'm here to play football, and now I have a reason to prove him. So I don't know. It could theoretically play out to be an interesting storyline if all that aligns. But we'll just see. And maybe, maybe not. Maybe his destiny was not that. And, this will be a long forgotten memory in a couple of years. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And that was I was just thinking before you said it, was that this just has to be a humbling experience for him. And you hit it right on the head. I think it's just time to prove it. Like, all right, it's time to work. And if he goes in with that mindset, he can, sky's the limit for him. Mm-hmm. You're exactly right. It's a position where he can win the job, and there's not that much pressure to win games right now. You can focus on football. He's in the right city. He's in the right position. That was a great point. And coming from a guy that his dad is maybe regarded as one of the best NFL players of all time, this is going to be truly humbling going forward. All right, so let's pivot again and let's jump to maybe some of our favorite picks throughout the draft. I think let's do like one Chiefs pick. And what? Why are you laughing?
Sorry for like a split second. I'm a child.
What?
For a split second, it's like our favorite pricks.
Oh man.
Oh.
Okay, let's pivot to our next segment where we kind of go over our favorite picks across the league throughout the draft. Let's do our favorite Chiefs pick, and then maybe go through and pick another team that we just thought was we just thought was a great pick, or they made a good decision. So for the Chiefs, I think in my opinion, my favorite was definitely the Jalen Royals, just because of what I've seen. I think I'm an offensive guy anyway, so just bolstering that offense would be a great pick. Getting Mahomes another weapon, you got to love that. And this guy just seems like he could be the real deal for where he was drafted, being drafted at pick 133. And a lot of guys thought a lot of experts had him higher and maybe at a second to third round grade. So getting him that late and slipping to, again, an offense that not necessarily struggles, but, can wishes to get back to that 2018 feel. By far, this was, I think, my favorite pick for the Chiefs for the 2025 NFL draft.
I think for the Chiefs, for me, I'm going to go with our guy Bassa. Just all the points I stated, I just think that, I just have a good feeling about that pick and what he could do for us. I think it's my favorite of the picks that we got.
So then I think the rest of the NFL, just looking at some of the picks that the other teams made, there's a couple that stand out to me, but I think I'm just going to go with what I think the Jaguars did. I think the Jaguars were missing an identity. I think they were missing, just having more offensive weapons for Trevor Lawrence, who struggled last year. Brian Thomas came in and was a phenomenal rookie pick for them. And getting Travis Hunter on that side, and you're almost drafting a 2-for-1 talent. If he can really be what he says and play both sides of the ball consistently, what you gave up for him is minute compared to what he can be. I think that Travis Hunter will be an incredible NFL player who I hope gets to kind of break the status quo of playing both sides. We've seen that in the MLB a little bit with Shohei Ohtani being able to pitch and play the field and hit. So it would be awesome just to see a guy kind of break out and be a star, for the NFL, but also on both sides of the ball, where growing up, a lot of kids play both sides of the ball, and in high school and then college, it kind of fades where they make you choose a side. And Travis Hunter was, I would say, one of the first full successful both sides of the ball kind of stars, where he was, he was just great on both sides of the ball. And so I think the Jaguars are going to give him that opportunity. I think they're going to, put the ball in his court and say, you say you can do this, let's see it. And so I think that them making that trade up from 5 to 2 with the Browns and going for Travis Hunter, not only from a market standpoint, but just an identity as a team, shows that they really want to try to win and give Trevor Lawrence some help, and also getting an awesome cornerback on the defensive side of the ball too.
Yeah, I'd have to say, my applaud or whatever you want to call it, kind of goes on the flip side of the Jaguars trade up, which is Cleveland, and just being able to get some more picks. I love the pick of Mason Graham. We talked about, them bolstering their defensive line. So they got Myles Garrett now and Mason Graham, and, among other, great players on their defensive line. So, that's a great pick, I think, for just really solidifying that aspect of themselves. Like, they know they've got a great defensive line. And then, they go ahead and pick up a running back from Ohio State who looks pretty good. And, again, the quarterback situation, because many times, and you even see this with like the Washington Commanders last year, you're kind of only at times a quarterback away from changing the whole program and the whole organization. And, just finding the right guy that fits and that can get it done can make all the difference. So, you got two rookies. Now, let me say, if the rookies don't pan out, I don't think that, like, they're going to be at best so with like Joe Flacco or Kenny Pickett, and that's on the upside. But if the rookies pan out, either Shedeur or Dylan Gabriel, and they play to their maximum potential, then you've got a different Cleveland Browns that you're dealing with. So and then you got picks for the future too. So I kind of like the way that they maneuvered the draft and some of the picks they made, and so I'm interested to see what happens in Cleveland and what they can do with their picks.
So then let's discuss some of the more surprising picks, and maybe some teams reached, or it was kind of just those WTF moments of teams choosing a guy. So Nick, you go first. Let me know what who you think was the kind of a surprise as far as from one of these teams. I know that I don't think the Chiefs had any surprises, at least not on my radar. So what other team do you think had a pretty surprising draft or a kind of a questionable
one? So one that like stands out, I don't know if I would call it. It is a little bit surprising, but I kind of feel like it's interesting what the Giants did. They had an interesting draft where I think that they drafted some good players, but I look at their quarterback room, and they've got like 5 different quarterbacks now who are kind of in a weird spot. They've got Russell Wilson, Jameson Winston, Tommy Cutlets, and now they just drafted Jackson Dart, who they went ahead and drafted, above Shedeur, above some of these other guys. So, obviously had him high on the radar, and he could be good. He's got a good zip, on his throws. Played in that Lane Kiffin offense for Ole Miss. So, and I think Lane Kiffin's a good coach. But the QB room just baffles me a little bit. Like, in a sense, it's like if you got 2 veteran quarterbacks and then like a decent, reliable backup in Tommy DeVito, then maybe wait, to get your quarterback for the future, kind of see what pans out from this year, and then wait to get like the guy that you really want. I mean, did they really want Jackson Dart? Like, was that their guy? I don't know. I don't know and I don't know that I could say right now that, that is going to be the guy of the future for them. I'm sure of all the quarterbacks, I'm sure, somebody else is going to, pan out to be decent. But right now, I will say, like, the only one that I really am like, I really like him. I think he's going to be great is Cam Ward. I think that he's got a lot of potential and a good mindset. But otherwise, of the other ones, it's kind of like a mixed bag of who knows what's going to happen. I don't feel like it's an insanely strong QB class. So yeah, New York, and then again they got Skadibo, which I like him, and Abdul Carter. Finally, they getting back to like the Giants of old, where they got a really strong defensive end, and I think that was intentional to sort of bring back the memories of Strahan and O.C. Umenyiora and Jason Pierre-Paul and those guys. So
Lawrence Taylor, don't forget him.
Lawrence Taylor, yeah, of course.
Comments will go crazy if you leave out Lawrence Taylor.
Yeah, but he's linebacker though. I mean, yes, for sure. I should have said. I was kind of we're talking about the edge and admittedly just showing like my age and the guys that I grew up with. But yes, Lawrence Taylor too. But for sure, like, I think that they kind of did that to bring that back to their identity of that strong defensive line for the New York Giants. And so again, that they were kind of like on my radar too with Cleveland of like, they made some interesting moves, some good picks, I think, some that were like, again, questionable. I don't know what's going to happen. I'm not 100% sold on Brian Dable as a coach. But let's see if they can make it work.
So I have a similar situation for very surprising pick. I honestly just don't like it at all. I think it was, it was one of those situations where Shedeur could have been drafted or even some of the other quarterbacks. But it was the Saints, New Orleans Saints, taking Tyler Show out of Louisville. And I saw this guy's clips from the combine, and this guy is worse than a sack of potatoes. I mean, I'm just kidding. There's just one viral clip going around. I don't actually know him, like what his play that much, but that one viral clip of him throwing a kind of across the field, I think it was just a super reach. And it's like, I know the Saints don't really have a direction. I know they've been having issues with David Carr, and just trying to figure out. Did I say Derek Carr?
Yeah, I was like,
well, they probably have an issue with his brother too.
Yeah.
They've been having issues with Derek Carr and trying to figure out what their identity is. They're in kind of salary cap hell, if you want to call it, where they're continuously over the cap and kind of kicking the can down the road. So to choose a guy that doesn't really have a good skill set, wasn't very high on a lot of people's draft boards, and pass up on a few other quarterbacks that maybe just off potential or media were a lot better. But even still, I think it was just a dumb pick to take early second round, 40th overall. I mean, that's a valued position. You could get a lot of talent in the top 40 picks. And so to take it on a quarterback that probably won't ever pan out, honestly. I mean, that's how I see it, is this guy would have to come in, and if you're taking a guy at 40th, you're expecting this guy to start in 2 years. And so if that's what you feel like the direction of your franchise is going, I mean, more power to you. But I think that's why the Saints are one of the, at least have not had success ever since, Drew Brees has been done there, and they continue to not have success because of the decisions they're making, whether it's the draft or in free agency. And they're kind of like the little brother to the Chiefs, because they always end up signing a bunch of Chiefs after they leave. Shout out Willie Gay, shout out Justin Reed, shout out Tyrann Mathieu, Daniel Sorensen, Jalen Saunders. I mean, the list goes on. It's crazy. So that's my surprise and I don't know if they traded up, but if they traded up to get him as well, that makes it 10 times worse, I think. Jackson Dart, I think, at least has a that potential factor with the big arm and big body. This guy, I mean, I don't think I don't know. I don't know where he came from or what they see in him.
From what I understand, he was the most pro style ready quarterback in the draft, which I think is so over. Like, I agree with completely everything that you said, because I think like that factor is a little overrated to me. If we're going by that, then Patrick Mahomes was not quote unquote pro ready, and obviously look how that turned out. Now, every once in a while, you can't bet it all on arm strength and athleticism always, because like for me, I know like I was high on like Trey Lance because he had a big arm, and he didn't pan out. And then Anthony Richardson also, who like hasn't had like he had like ups and downs, but who may not pan out either. But just because and I was just like I like that you can't coach them having a rocket arm. Like, you just can't coach that.
Right.
You can coach somebody into being pro ready like they did with Mahomes. and they do with other guy Lamar or whoever. But I don't know. Sometimes I feel like Pro Ready, like that's kind of overrated. So I totally agree with everything you said.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's definitely overrated, and especially just for being that high of a pick. When Shedeur falls to pick 144, and you take a guy that, again, you're expecting to start in 2 years, within 2 years, it just seems like a poverty franchise pick is what it feels like. I feel bad for Saints fans, honestly, just because it just felt like a dumb pick. So let's do some grades on the draft. We can let's start with the Chiefs, and then we'll go down, maybe do a couple other teams. So Nick, give me your grade. Let's go A through F. Give me your grade for the Chiefs and what you think that they how they did.
I think I'm gonna say like B+ to A-, somewhere in there. I don't know that I can commit to one or the other. And the only reason I say that is just like I think it was everything that we've talked about, like what we needed and address team needs, which is good. That's why you get a good grade and like a B+ or an A. I only say like A- right now because like I don't feel like there was no like crazy ridiculous pick where you're like that was the guy that will change everything. Because it's like every pick that we had addressed our need, but has some potential drawback, and I guess that's true for every player and every team. But even like our first round pick, could pan out to where like he doesn't ever play because he's injured or something. So like that's the only reason why like there's a little bit of like ticks on everybody, but yeah. So I like B+, A-, like somewhere in there.
Yeah, I think I'm pretty close. It honestly depends on how Josh Simmons turns out. I mean, he would be the make or break of this being, one of the Chiefs' better draft classes versus it being a dud. And so, not necessarily a dud, but um, I'm right in that range. I think I'm at A-, and I think it could be A+, um, with Josh Simmons being, just because of the different positions that they picked and the value that they got of these guys. They addressed pretty much every need that was needed in the offseason. And like I said, it's all potential right now. We know that it's all potential based on tape and what we think people can do and injury status and things like that. So that's why I'll pick A-, I guess, is just because I think it was one of the better draft classes and could be in the long run. I think it could turn into be, if Josh Simmons turns out to be the 10-year left tackle that we need, if Royals becomes that third receiver that the Chiefs can grow over the next 5 years. If Bossa becomes a rotational linebacker, if our pass rush with those Lott and Gillette, turn out to be good, and if we could turn a 7th-round running back over and put him in the rotation with Rashad Smith, I mean, there is a ton of potential, and so that's why I think you got to value it pretty high. I mean, I think most grades I saw from experts were at A, around that mark, and so I think we agree that the Chiefs, I think, were, of course, they're one of the best franchises in the NFL, and they know what they're doing. And so I think that they knew what they were drafting and they knew why. And that's why most people are saying they got an A to, that B+ to A- average. So I'm thinking now let's do the top 5 teams. Let's go through and kind of give those grades. I've got pulled up, and I'll read just a couple of their draft picks. So we'll start with the Tennessee Titans. And of course, we know that number 1 was Cam Ward. And they didn't have another pick until pick 52. And they took an edge out of UCLA with Aludoho, I think is how you say his last name. And then their 3rd-round pick, they ended up taking a safety out of Penn State with Winston Jr. So with those, keep those in mind that they got Cam Ward, but they kind of didn't have a lot of 2nd-round picks and things like that. What would you give Tennessee's grade as far as for their future? Your mic it's not working.
Sorry, muted, but yeah, for Tennessee, I'm gonna say like a B, maybe B plus. Potentially got your quarterback of the future. Thought it was really cool that Warren Moon allowed Cam Ward to take that number one, jersey. So again, I said it earlier. A quarterback and the right one can change your whole trajectory of your team, as Chiefs fans know, and many teams across the league, know through experience or are finding out. So, or rather, they're always looking for it. So yeah, I think I like B plus just on the fact of like, you could potentially have your guy of the future. Otherwise, the picks, they probably make sense for their team, but that's the one that, and I agree, like I agree with them going for him because you have to get your quarterback. You have to get him. So
Yeah, no, I'm pretty close to what you're thinking as well. I'm at a B minus. I think Kim Ward, I think, is a great prospect, and he showed glimpses of huge potential through his career in Miami. Um, but again, he's more of a potential. We talked a little bit earlier about being, NFL ready, game ready. He has that big arm. He is a big body, uh, but your entire franchise, for the next 5 years is dangling on if this guy turns out or not. And so sometimes those are scary, and they're based on potential. So I think they had to make that choice. They did need the quarterback of the future. Will Levis didn't turn out, so I think it was the right choice. And again, I think some of these other guys, the edge in the corner that they took, I think was probably needs that they had. I know they've lost some guys, and it's always good to get a pass rusher, especially in third round. So I think a B minus is probably, I think, fair, or at least somewhere around that B range. I think we're both kind of on the right track and the same thinking.
on the
So what
upside,
about sorry.
the upside is that Cam Ward doesn't eat mayonnaise out of the jar. So
You know what? I'm going to change from a B minus to a B. Just from that. Okay, let's do Jacksonville. So they had the second pick, and we know kind of what that happened with getting Travis Hunter, and then some of the other guys. They went a guy out of Tulane in the third round, corner, Ransaw. They took an offensive lineman out of West Virginia in the third round. They had pick 88 and 89, so they had back-to-back picks. They took an offensive lineman, and then they kind of took a running back out of Virginia Tech, Tutton. So what would you grade Jacksonville as far as, we know the majority of that grade is going to come from getting Travis Hunter?
Yeah, I'm so like not sure about Travis Hunter and what that's going to turn out for them. I think he's a better corner than he is a receiver. They needed corners. They got two, which is good. So that's on the plus side. However, I think Travis Hunter wants to play more receiver because you probably want to get paid like a receiver versus getting paid like a cornerback. So he's going to want to play that primarily and then play cornerback secondarily. And with that, I think that his route running needs a little bit of fine tuning. He's obviously athletic, but it's a big jump. It's a whole nother step to be in the league. And we know that, people are athletic, but everybody's athletic in the NFL. You know what I mean? And, so I get it. I get the upside of generational talent, maybe once in a lifetime talent in Travis Hunter and what he can do. So I understand, why he was rated a top 3 pick, but I don't know how it's going to turn out. But they got another cornerback, so that'll help them if he does play primarily receiver. And getting a guard, like I know that they need to protect Trevor Lawrence if that's if they're going to stick with him. He really needs to get a boost in his offensive line, and then adding bits and pieces here and there. So I'm going to say for the Jags, like B minus. For me, like strong B minus, just because it's such a risk with Travis Hunter and like in the sense of him translating his skills over. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm gonna go B plus. I think that I'm confident in Travis Hunter being at least um, and I agree with what you're saying about him probably wanting to play more receiver to get paid that way. I think he is a very good corner that will be a average to above average receiver is probably how I see it. Some people think he will want to play wide receiver or he's better at wide receiver. In my opinion, I think he's he'll be one of the better corners in the league who can come in and give you 30 to 50 receiving yards a game is kind of what I'm assuming his role would be. And so I think that alone is very valuable in my opinion. And getting just Trevor Lawrence another weapon. Again, we talked about it earlier where he had a struggling season last year, and the Jags I think underperformed. And so bringing this guy, turning that culture around, and getting a lockdown corner is a huge value by itself. If he was just playing corner, I mean, I think that's a huge value. But to take off some of it just because they did have to give up a lot, including a first round pick for next year. And so is it worth Travis Hunter? Basically 2 first round picks and I think a second. The time will tell, but um, I think B plus is what I would give the Jags as far as their draft grade. So let's go to the Giants. I know that this was more of the exciting ones and kind of some of the bigger names that they took. And so we know that they had the 3rd overall pick where they took Abdul Carter out of Penn State. And then we talked about where they moved up and drafted Jackson Dart there at pick 25. And then some other notable picks were in round 3 at pick 65. They took Darius Alexander at D tackle out of Toledo. And then in round 4, they took at pick 105, they took Scatabo, the running back out of Arizona State. And so what would you give the Giants? I know this one was one of the more exciting ones and kind of the bigger names in the draft.
Yeah, I'm going to say like A minus maybe. I think that they drafted really well for the most part. I really like Abdul Carter a lot. Like I think he's a beast and he's going to make like an immediate impact. Again, going back to what we talked about with the quarterback situation, like if Dart ends up being the guy that they really wanted and, everything that they were hoping for, then I think then it'll be great. Like it'll be exactly what they needed. He gets to sit behind, 2 veteran quarterbacks potentially, assuming they both make the roster at the start of the season. But Russ is a good I think example to learn from in the sense of like he's definitely got all the fundamentals down. And both Russ and Winston got good leadership skills, even though they're kind of both funny at it. But they do. I think they're both good leaders, and they're both like locker room guys. So that's those are things that are like small things that a quarterback should have in addition to their skills. And again, like we talked about, like Dart's got a he can throw darts. So so he's got probably the talent to do it. Just gotta hone it all in and translate it to the next level. But it could be a great spot for him. So I'm gonna say A minus.
Yeah, I think I agree with you on the A minus. I think that's, and it could be a lot better based on Jackson Dart, his potential. And if the Giants traded up and they thought it was worth it to get him, and he turns out to be this, next coming of Josh Allen or something like that, then it's a slam dunk draft where it's an A plus because of the other guys that they were able to get with Abdul Carter. There was no pressure that they had to try to trade, or with the Shedeur Sanders, situation. They knew they weren't going to get. I think it was kind of consensus that Travis Hunter was going to go too, and they probably got the most talented, athletic guy in the draft. I would say, at least having that edge rush. We talked a lot earlier in the show about having the pass rush, and then you brought up about bringing back kind of that identity that the Giants would have of having the pass rush. So I think that was a slam dunk. I think that they bolstered up their defensive line again, getting another tackle, and then bringing in a running back, bringing in a guy that surprisingly, I was surprised he went that early. Honestly, when I saw that, I think it was first pick, or not first pick, one of the first picks in the third round, or fourth round, excuse me. I think it was, I was like, wow. I didn't think he was going to go that high, and I wasn't very high on him. I know that you were, Scatabo, or but if it works out, it's great. I know he was a playmaker, and he was, carrying that Arizona State team. They made it, if I remember right, I think they made it to either the championship or one of the, deeper bowl runs, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
And so I think that it's worked for the Eagles when you take the big name. You get a guy that comes from a bigger school and has a good performance in college football. It's worked out for the Eagles, and I think it could work out for the Giants when you take a page out of one of your rivals and start taking those big names. I think it'll work.
Yeah, I think just to go back real quick to like Jackson Dart, like my comparisons for him were kind of like, I was thinking he reminded me a lot of like a Justin Herbert or Bo Nix. So even if, it's not necessarily at that Josh Allen level yet, even those guys, playing at that level, I think, would be like worth it in your sense, like what you were talking about, like, make the draft even better for them.
Oh yeah. If Dart turns into a Justin Herbert level quarterback, I think this is by far one of the better drafts in recent history, as far as just the value that you got out of all your positions. Definitely. Okay, so let's move on to the Patriots. I think that there was quite a bit of good picks there, where a lot of people think that they had the best draft by far. Nick, your mic is going crazy. Oh, there it goes. It went away. Let's go to the Patriots. So I think a lot of people think that they had the best draft by far as just the value that they got. They didn't do anything crazy. Mike Vrabel, I think, was knew exactly who they wanted. They took Will Campbell on the fourth pick. Later in at pick 38 in the second round, they ended up getting Travion Henderson, that running back duo out of Ohio State. And then later picks, they get Kyle Williams, a receiver who a lot of people like out of Washington State. I've heard good things about him. They end up getting a center from Georgia, Jared Wilson, in the third round. Fourth round, they get a safety, Craig Woodson, California. So they had a really good draft from what I've seen and experts have said as far as the Patriots, and they're trying to rebuild that, that title town, that winning mentality. And they got Mike Vrabel, they've got Drake May, they got good pieces. So Nick, what do you grade the Patriots draft pick for 2025?
I'm gonna say like a B+, just because I think that, well, it all depends. Like, again, like they didn't draft necessarily like the flashiest, craziest, thing, but they're sort of, I think, returning to that previous, Belichick style of drafting. Obviously Vrabel being, a product of that. I think that he's getting a lot of like tips or using that, history and knowledge. So to that sense, it's like, maybe they didn't pick up, we'll see. I don't know that they picked up anybody that's like going to take the league by storm. But at the same time, they kind of, I think very much like the Chiefs, like they just drafted very much like what their needs were. I think that getting Will Campbell was like the smartest and most Patriot choice. to get, with their pick. Like we talked about, like if somehow Travis Hunter fell there, that maybe, they would pick him. But, we also are like, they're probably going to go Will Campbell because it just makes sense for them to strengthen their offensive line. They've always had that in years past when they were successful. So, the only reason I say B-2 is like, but there's no one in this draft that I would say like, necessarily fit what they were looking for. But I'm not, and maybe this is like biased because it's more about like their team, but I don't know if that they really fixed or addressed anything like with their quarterback situation. Like, I don't know that, they're not there yet, let me just say. But this is a really good start. So that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, I like B plus as well. I think Will Campbell, I think, was a for sure pick. There was some questions about him as far as like his skill set, arm length, things like that. And in his interview when he got drafted, he kind of showed his heart and who he's going to be, and I think he's going to fit in perfectly with that Patriot mindset of him saying that he's going to die for those guys. So I think that was kind of a slam dunk for them, and I'm sure they're very excited. And the ability to get one of those two-headed monster running backs out of Ohio State, Henderson, it's just another weapon there on the offensive side where you went two offensive players in the first two picks, and that just shows that they're kind of all in on Drake May and his development and trying to bolster that offense. So I think that they were good picks. I think that it was a solid draft for them. I don't think it was like this super crazy draft, but I think B plus is definitely well deserved. And then so finally is pick 5. We have the Cleveland Browns, and we've talked about it a little bit, but I'll kind of go through and list off some of theirs. So we talked about how they traded back. So they traded to pick 5, and they took Mason Graham out of Michigan. They ended up getting or they got a linebacker, Schweisinger, I think, UCLA, at pick 33. And then they end up getting Judkins, that other side of that Ohio State two-headed monster. And then they ended up getting a tight end out of Bowling Green. They got Dylan Gabriel out of Oregon. They took a running back out of Tennessee. And then they ended up getting Shedeur Sanders, who we talked about a lot. So, Nick, what was your your grade for Cleveland Browns? I know this one's kind of it probably could go two ways, but I think this one may be one of the better ones.
Yeah, I'm going to go just A flat because I think that they like got a well-rounded squad of young players in this draft, very much like good value picks. My only like knock would like that would maybe not make it like an A plus would be that it's kind of like weird, or I don't know, that it's it might be a waste that you picked up 2 quarterbacks in the same draft. But at the same time, for all the reasons that we've already talked about, like they didn't know maybe if Shedeur would still be there, or that he would still be there, and that it could end up being good for the QB competition. I mean, you're doubling your odds, I guess, of hopefully hitting the jackpot on a young quarterback. So you could say that, but technically speaking, on paper, I'd rather, I'd feel better about giving them an A plus if it was like they got another player that they needed for a certain position, maybe with a Dylan Gabriel pick, if they knew and I'm sure I'm not going to say I'm sure, but I would think if they knew they could get Shedeur in 5th, they probably wouldn't have got Dylan Gabriel as early, maybe. I don't know. I don't know if that's true, but I feel like it is. And they would have, got a better value player in that spot instead.
No, that's exactly why I would go from A to A minus for myself, just because you ended up, and I don't want to say it's a waste because you're right. There's going to be QB competition. You're doubling your odds at getting a young rookie quarterback to turn out to be something great. But if you knew that Shedeur, hindsight 2020, and you see that Shedeur was going to fall in the 5th, you would have taken somebody else, I think, and not Dylan Gabriel. I think that's probably, if you ask the that front office there for Cleveland. I'm sure that's the answer they would give you, just because you've already got a kind of a quarterback competition with the first two guys you got on the team with Flacco and Pickett, and now you're putting a second quarterback competition just for the backup position, and you could have addressed maybe another position. And that Dylan Gabriel pick wasn't something late as well. It was a pick 94. We're talking top 100 player out of the draft. So I'm sure you hit it right on the head. I think that they would definitely, if they could do it again and they knew the results, I think they would definitely have picked someone else. So that's why I would drop into an A-. But I think that's good. And so I think, guys, I think that's the show. I think we had a good talk about the Chiefs draft. I think we had a good talk with about the draft in general, different picks, our favorite picks. Nick, you got anything to say to the people before we call it?
No, my hope is restored. I have faith again that the Chiefs are going to win the Super Bowl.
Is this your too early selection? The day after the draft, you're picking the Chiefs to win the Super Bowl?
Yeah, for sure.
Side note,
coming back.
Side note: the day before the draft, we were picking the Chiefs to win the Super Bowl.
Yeah, oh yeah.
It doesn't matter.
We already knew. The day after. No, maybe not the day after the Super Bowl. Definitely not the day after. But now, for sure.
Doesn't matter. NFL draft, beer craft. You laugh. Lakers in 5. Chiefs in 5. All right, people. Well, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. You can find us on all the social medias. We've kind of got them, if you're watching visually, down there below, and I'll put them in the description. Thanks for watching, and we'll be back here probably next week again to talk more, maybe draft and some off-season moves, getting ready for training camp. So we'll see you guys next week. Peace.
Peace out.